The Woman Who Wouldn't Break. A story of Jasmine Pickering and Archie Davidson. Before the chapters begin, listen to this first. There are women who break quietly. They shatter in private, sweep the pieces under the bed, and wake up the next morning with perfect posture and a locked jaw, and you would never know. Jasmine Pickering was not that kind of woman. She broke loudly, she broke early, and then she rebuilt herself into something so armored, so calculated, so entirely in control, that people stopped trying to reach her. Not because she was cold, though many called her that, but because she was terrifying in the most specific way. She was always right, always first, always the one walking away before anyone else got the chance. By the time she was 28, she had a career that made people jealous, a wardrobe that made people stare, and a track record in love that made people keep their distance. Men tried. They always tried. And she let them, just long enough to confirm what she already believed. That no one would stay. That no one really could. She was not broken. She was defended. And then Archie Davidson showed up at a baby shower in Charleston, leaning against a wall like he owned it, wearing a gray linen shirt with the sleeves rolled back, watching her watch the room. And he smiled. Not the kind of smile that asked for permission. The kind that already knew the answer. She should have left the moment she saw that smile. Instead, he picked her up, literally, physically lifted her off the ground, put her in his car, and drove away. And what happened in the hours, the months, and the years that followed didn't just change her life. It dismantled every wall she had ever built, brick by slow, terrifying brick. This is not a story about a woman who needed saving. This is a story about a woman who finally decided she was worth staying for. Chapter 1. The first time Jasmine Pickering understood what power felt like. She was 7 years old, standing in the middle of a school playground in Richmond, Virginia, with red Georgia clay dust on her sneakers and her chin tipped up at a boy twice her size. It was the kind of afternoon that turned everything gold. The late September light pressing warm against the swing sets, the smell of cut grass and chalk mixing in the air. Jasmine had been sitting on the low wooden bench near the climbing frame, carefully readying her shoelaces in double knots because she liked things exact, when a boy named Derek cut across her space and knocked her lunch bag off the bench. Not by accident. She looked up slowly. Her sandwich was on the ground. "Watch where you put your stuff," he said, without stopping. "Pick it up," she replied. Her voice was calm. That surprised even her. He turned around. "Make me." Something ignited in her chest. Not fear. Not yet. Just heat. Sharp and certain. She stood up. She didn't think about how much bigger he was. She didn't think about the other kids who were starting to look over. She thought about exactly one thing. The bag. Her bag. On the ground. Because of him. "Say sorry," she said. He laughed. And that was the end of reasonable. What followed was brief, loud, and decisive. Jasmine shoved first. He shoved back. She grabbed his arm, twisted the way she'd seen her older brother do in the backyard, and pushed him hard enough that he sat down in the dirt. A teacher ran across the yard shouting her name. She stood still, breathing hard, hands at her sides, watching him. He didn't get back up immediately. Later, she sat in the principal's office on a plastic chair with a scrape on her forearm, and her hair half escaped from her braids. Her father arrived in his work clothes, navy slacks, a pressed white collar shirt, and sat down beside her without a word to the principal first. "What happened?" he asked her. "He knocked my lunch off the bench on purpose," she said. "I told him to say sorry." "He didn't." Her father looked at her for a long moment, then turned to the principal. "Did the other boy get called in?" The principal cleared her throat. "Mr. Pickering, physical altercations aren't." "Did he apologize?" her father asked, looking back at Jasmine. "No." He nodded once. Like that answered everything. In the car on the way home, the windows were cracked and the radio was low. Jasmine stared out at the passing houses, replaying the sound of the boy sitting down in the dirt. Her father drove in silence for almost 5 minutes. Then he said, "You did right." She turned to him. "Mom's going to be upset. Let me worry about your mother." He glanced at her briefly. You don't let people disrespect you, Jasmine. Not once. You understand me. She nodded slowly, absorbing every syllable. Not even love? She asked, not entirely sure why she said it. Her father's jaw tensed slightly. Especially not love, he said, and his voice had something in it she couldn't name, something tight and old, like a lesson that had cost him. That evening, her mother sat across from them at the dinner table with her fork beside her plate, not touching her food. She could have been seriously hurt, she said. She wasn't, her father replied. That's not the point, Aaron. She defended herself. I'm not punishing that. Her mother looked at Jasmine with the kind of softness that felt almost worse than being in trouble. Baby, you can walk away. Walking away is strength too. Jasmine frowned. But he didn't say sorry. Not everyone will, her mother said gently. You can't force the world to treat you the way you deserve. Then what do you do? Jasmine asked. Her parents looked at each other across the table. Two different answers sitting in the silence between them. You control what you can, her father said. Jasmine picked up that word and tucked it somewhere deep. Control. It felt solid. It felt safe. She didn't know yet that it would take her 20 years and one unmovable man to understand how much damage a word like that could do, and how much harder it would be to set it down. Chapter 2. By the time Jasmine walked into her first year of high school at 16, she already knew her own architecture. She knew which expressions made people nervous. She knew how long to hold eye contact before someone looked away first. She knew that asking why before agreeing to anything gave her information, and information was the next best thing to control. These were not lessons anyone had taught her formally. They were things she had gathered quietly, year by year, and arranged into a system that kept her upright. The first boy to try his luck was named Tyler. He appeared at her locker 2 days into freshman year at Jefferson Academy in Richmond, tall, easy smile, trying to look like he wasn't nervous. Hey, he said. Jasmine closed her locker without looking at him. What do you want? He blinked. That wasn't the response he'd rehearsed. I wanted to say hi. You said it. I was also thinking, he started. Don't lead with thinking, she said, finally looking at him. What do you actually want? His smile faltered, but he recovered quickly. She gave him credit for that. I want to hang out sometime. You, me, wherever. She studied him. He wasn't looking at the floor. That was something. Tomorrow after school, she said. Don't be late. His face broke into a full, genuine smile. She noted it, too eager. That was already a data point. He arrived 10 minutes early the next afternoon, which told her he had been thinking about it all day, which meant she already had more power in this interaction than she was comfortable giving. She watched him from across the parking lot for a moment before walking over. You were here early, she said. No, Don't, she said. You were early. Just say it. A pause. Fine. Yes. I was early. She nodded, approving the honesty if not the eagerness. They walked to a diner on Broad Street. She asked questions. He answered them all correctly, agreeing with most of what she said, adjusting his opinions to match hers when she pushed back. By the time the food arrived, she had made her decision. This won't work, she said, setting her fork down. He stared at her. We've been here 20 minutes. Long enough. She stood, picked up her jacket. You agree with everything. That means you either don't have opinions or you're afraid of mine. Either way, it doesn't work for me. He sat there with his mouth slightly open as she walked out. It became a pattern with a rhythm she could almost predict. Boys came. They tried. They cracked under the pressure she applied. Not cruelty, she told herself, just standards, and she moved on before they could decide to leave first. The whole cycle averaged about a week. One lasted 9 days, which she privately considered almost interesting. Her best friend, Simone, watched all of this with the patience of someone who had long since accepted she couldn't change it. You know what people call you, right? Simone said one afternoon, the two of them sitting outside under the oak tree behind the gym. I don't care what people call me, Jasmine replied, not looking up from her book. Impossible. Jasmine turned a page. Good. Maybe they'll stop trying. Simone looked at her for a long time. Jazz, don't you ever get tired? Of what? Winning all the time. Jasmine finally looked at her. Winning is not the same as controlling, isn't it? For you? The words landed in a strange way, not painfully, but with weight. Jasmine didn't answer. She looked back down at her book, but the words on the page stopped making sense for a moment. That night, she lay in her bedroom watching the ceiling and listening to the neighborhood settle into quiet. A couple walked past on the sidewalk below, their laughter floating up through the open window. The girl leaned into the boy. He adjusted without thinking, like it was the most natural thing in the world. Jasmine watched them until they were gone. Something sat in her chest after that. She didn't name it. She didn't have to. She just lay there in the dark, wondering, not for the first time, but for the first time loudly, why that kind of easy looked so impossible from the inside. Chapter 3. 3 years later, Jasmine arrived at the University of Virginia in Charlottesville carrying 2 overpacked suitcases, a full academic scholarship, and a reputation that had somehow followed her across county lines. It wasn't that people already knew her. It was that she walked into every new space exactly the same way, shoulders back, pace unhurried, gaze already measuring. And within 48 hours, the room reorganized itself around her. Simone had followed her to UVA, which Jasmine would never admit out loud was a relief. On move-in day, they stood together in the wide stone courtyard while other freshmen bumped into each other with excitement and too much luggage. You're doing it again, Simone said. What? Deciding who everyone is before they open their mouths. I'm observing. Same thing, different word. Jasmine didn't dignify that with a response. She picked up her bag and walked toward the dormitory. College introduced a new category of men. They were older in years, but not necessarily in understanding. Confident in the way that came from 4 years of being told they were the smart ones. They came with better opening lines and worse follow-through. Jasmine moved through them the same way she always had. She gave them enough time to show her who they were, and they always did, usually within a week. It was Simone who finally put down the line in the sand. They were sitting in the campus cafe in October of sophomore year when Simone set her coffee cup on the table with the deliberate quietness of someone who had been rehearsing this. I need to say something to you, and I need you to let me finish. Jasmine looked at her. That's a concerning opening. Jazz. Simone's voice was firm. You're not giving any of them a real chance. I give them time. You give them tests. That's not the same thing. Simone leaned forward. You go in already looking for the exit. And the second they do anything that confirms your theory, you're gone. Jasmine was quiet for a moment. Because they always confirm it. Because you designed the test so they will. The words settled over Jasmine like cold water. She sat back, jaw tight, not agreeing out loud. She never agreed out loud about things that landed this close. Try something different, Simone said. Just once. Let someone else lead. Let it happen without controlling the outcome. Jasmine stared at her. That sounds like a nightmare. I know, Simone said. That's why I'm asking you to do it. She tried. For almost 3 weeks, she tried. A marketing major named Patrick who was careful and considerate and never said anything wrong. She let him plan dates. She sat in his car and didn't redirect. She watched movies she didn't choose and ate food she didn't order and sat through conversations that moved at half the speed she preferred. And she was exhausted. Genuinely, completely exhausted. It ended on a Tuesday afternoon outside the library. He sat across from her on the stone bench and said, with genuine kindness, Jasmine, you're never really here. Are you? She opened her mouth. Closed it. I'm trying to be. I know, he said. I can see it. But trying so hard to be present means you're always somewhere else. She didn't argue. She just nodded slowly, which surprised them both. That night, alone in her dorm room with the lights off, she let herself feel it. Not the failure, but the exhaustion underneath the failure. The sheer weight of holding every interaction in both hands, rotating it constantly, looking for the crack before it could find her. She whispered it to the ceiling. I don't know how to do this differently. And that, finally, was the truest thing she had said in years. Hello, lovers and billionaires. Leave your name in the comments if you'd like me to use it in the next story or give you a shout out. Please be sure to like, share, and subscribe to the channel, as this encourages me to create more interesting episodes like this. This channel continues to thrive because of the love you show. Thank you. Now, let's dive right into the rest of the story. Chapter 4. At 25, Jasmine Pickering was the youngest senior associate at Howcroft and Monroe, a boutique strategy firm in Washington, D.C., and she wore that fact like a second blazer. She arrived at the glass-fronted building on K Street every morning at 8:47, coffee in hand, heels precise on marble floors, and every person she passed moved slightly, not out of fear exactly, but the specific awareness that some people carry a gravitational field, and this was hers. Work made sense in a way that people never quite did. There were deliverables and timelines and hierarchies that operated on logic. You performed, you advanced. You did not perform, you were managed out. Jasmine performed beautifully. Her colleague Dana caught up to her in the corridor one afternoon after a particularly long budget presentation. A few of us are going to Founding Farmers tonight. You should come. Jasmine didn't slow down. For what purpose? For fun, Jasmine. The purpose is fun. She glanced at him sideways. Define fun. Dana stopped walking and stared at her back as she continued down the corridor. You're actually serious, he called after her. Always, she replied, already turning the corner. She went home to her Georgetown apartment, changed into a silk camisole and tailored gray sweatpants, and sat on the couch with a glass of red wine and a report she didn't need to read until Thursday. Her phone buzzed. Simone, are you watching TV or working? Working, Jasmine said. It's 8:30 p.m. on a Friday. Impressive observation. A pause. Then Jazz. I have news. Jasmine set the report down. Good or terrible? Good, I think. Another pause, and then Daniel proposed. Last night, on the roof of the hotel in Savannah. Jasmine sat up straighter. Simone, I know. You're engaged. I am. Silence. Jasmine turned this over slowly, like a smooth stone. 3 years. She tried to count back and landed on the fact that she had barely noticed 3 years passing, and Simone had built an entire life inside that time. I want you to be my maid of honor, Simone said. Jasmine let out a short laugh. That feels like a risk. It is, Simone said. That's why I'm asking you. Jasmine was quiet for a moment, looking at the city lights through the tall windows of her apartment. The clean, ordered view of a life she had built perfectly, on purpose, on her terms. Okay, she said finally. I'll do it. After she hung up, she sat for a long time without the report, without the wine, without anything to focus on. The apartment was exactly the way she liked it. Quiet, controlled, precisely hers. She looked at the windows. She had never once felt lonely in this apartment. Tonight was different. Tonight there was something in the air, not sadness, not quite, but its neighbor, the awareness of space, of how much of the silence she had arranged herself, and how much of it had simply never been filled. She picked up the report again, but she didn't read it. Chapter 5. Simone's wedding was held on a Saturday in early June at a restored plantation estate in Savannah, Georgia, all white magnolias and Spanish moss, and the kind of light that makes people feel like they're living inside a painting. Jasmine stood in her dusty rose maid of honor dress at the edge of the ceremony garden, watching the caterers make minute adjustments to the centerpieces, and thought, this is either the most beautiful thing she had ever seen or the most terrifying, and she couldn't decide which. You look like you're planning an escape route, Simone said, appearing at her elbow. I'm observing the layout, Jasmine replied. For what? In case someone needs help. Simone looked at her with the patient amusement of a woman who had known her for 16 years. Jasmine, breathe. This is a good day. Jasmine exhaled. You look extraordinary. It was the simple truth. Simone stood in ivory silk, her locks pinned up and falling in careful tendrils, her face the face of someone who was exactly where she had decided to be. No hesitation, no armor, just certainty. You're not unlovable, Simone said quietly, as if she had been reading Jasmine's thoughts. Jasmine stiffened. I wasn't thinking that. You don't have to, but I'm saying it anyway. Simone squeezed her arm. You're not unlovable. You're just unreachable. And there's a difference, Jazz. There's a real difference. Jasmine looked away, focusing on a passing bridesmaid. Okay, she said. Not agreeing. Not disagreeing. Just surviving the sentence. The ceremony was exactly what she expected and completely different from what she'd prepared for. She watched Daniel look at Simone when she came down the aisle with an expression Jasmine had seen before only in films, and she'd always assumed it was fabricated. That particular kind of looking that said, all of it, all of you, and I chose this, and I would keep choosing it. She watched him look at Simone like that, and felt something fracture quietly behind her sternum. I choose you, he said during the vows. And I choose you, Simone said back. Choose. The simplest word. Jasmine had spent years being the one who ended things, the one who walked out before the other person got comfortable enough to leave. She had told herself it was smart, efficient, protective. Watching this, she felt the cost of it for the first time. At the reception, she drank champagne and gave a speech that made people laugh and cry in the right places. She had practiced it 9 times, and she danced twice and smiled in every photograph. Later, when the music had softened and most people had moved to the edges of the tent, she stood near the floral arch with her shoes off and her glass empty, watching Simone and Daniel sway together in the middle of the dance floor. No one watching them, just them, like the room had contracted to their size. Jasmine felt the edge of something she didn't have words for. Not envy. She told herself it was not envy. Just the quiet recognition that she was standing just outside a door she had never let herself try. She left before the last dance. She told herself it was the heels. In the taxi back to the hotel, she stared out the window at Savannah blurring past and thought, what if Simone is right? What if I am simply standing too far away on purpose? She didn't answer herself. She just rode in the dark and let the question sit. Chapter 6. 2 years after the wedding, Simone called with the specific tone of voice that preceded announcements. So, she said, there is a small human situation. Jasmine, who was in the middle of rewriting a client brief, set her pen down. Please speak in complete sentences. I'm pregnant, Simone said. 14 weeks. And before you say anything clinical, I'm happy for you, Jasmine said, and meant it. A pause. You are, Simone. Obviously. Yes. The shower was held 6 weeks later in their house in Charleston, South Carolina. A renovated Victorian with cream walls and wide windows and the perpetual smell of something baking. Jasmine drove the 2 hours from D.C. on a Saturday morning in a linen wrap dress the color of terracotta, her hair loose, sunglasses on, telling herself this was just a social event and she would stay 2 hours. Inside the house, it was warm and crowded and full of the specific energy of people who were collectively delighted about something. Jasmine moved through it at her usual pace, drink in hand, back slightly to the wall, watching. She spotted a man near the far window who appeared to be doing exactly the same thing. He was tall, she noticed that first, with broad shoulders under a gray linen shirt, sleeves rolled to the forearm. Light brown hair, a jaw that looked like it had opinions. He was watching a man near the snack table try and fail to carry a plate and a drink simultaneously, and there was a slight smile on his face that looked like he was genuinely entertained. He's going to drop that plate, Jasmine murmured, more to herself than anyone. He's been at it for about 4 minutes, said a voice to her left. I give it another 30 seconds. She turned. He was closer than she'd realized. He had moved, or she had moved, or the room had rearranged them. Gray linen shirt. That jaw. Eyes that were watching her now instead of the man with the plate. Who are you? she asked, because she had never seen the point in opening with less than that. He didn't flinch. Archie Davidson. And that was not the opener I expected. What were you expecting? Hi, maybe. Hi takes longer to get to the point. Archie Davidson looked at her steadily. Not with the nervousness she was used to, not with overconfidence either. Just steadiness. Like he was in no particular hurry and found this genuinely interesting. You look like you're cataloging everyone in this room, he said. I'm observing. Is there a difference? The difference, she said, is intent. He tilted his head slightly, almost smiled. And what's the intent? She didn't answer that. She took a sip of her drink instead and let the silence sit, which she usually did to make people uncomfortable. He let it sit right back. That was new. You're not going to fill that, she said, noting it. No, he said. Most people do. I know. He said it without judgment, like a fact about weather. Before she could decide what to do with him, he reached out and took her hand, not grabbing, not hesitating, just casual, as if this were the entirely natural next step. Jasmine looked at their hands, then at him. What are you doing? Getting you out of here, he said. You've been backed against that wall since you walked in. She pulled back, or tried to. He didn't grip tighter, but he didn't let go. Let go, she said sharply. Come with me, he said. Not a question, not a demand, just a sentence with direction. I don't know you. You'll have the whole drive to fix that. She pulled her hand back firmly. I'm not getting in anyone's car. Okay, he said. And then, before she could register what was happening, he lifted her. Smoothly, without ceremony, her feet left the floor, and Archie Davidson carried Jasmine Pickering toward the front door while she stared at the ceiling in complete astonishment. Put me down, she said, dangerously quiet. In a second, he replied, stepping outside. Archie. Almost there. He set her down beside a clean black car, opened the door, and held it. Jasmine stared at him, heat in her face, something electric and furious running through her. She stopped. You actually just picked me up. You were standing still when you needed to be moving, he said, and there was nothing mocking in it. He just meant it. She looked at him for a long moment. At the open door. At the evening. Then she got in the car. She would never entirely be able to explain why. Chapter 7. The restaurant was a mid-sized Italian place on King Street. Not showy, not casual, somewhere precisely in between. The hostess showed them to a table near the window. Jasmine sat across from Archie Davidson with her back straight, her arms folded across the table's edge, and her expression carefully assembled into something that looked like composure and felt like standing on a fault line. You need to explain yourself, she said, once the waiter had taken their drink order and left. Water, Archie replied, as if she'd been asking what he ordered. That's not what I meant. I know. He looked at her calmly. What would you like me to explain? The part where you physically removed me from a party. You weren't enjoying the party. That's irrelevant, she said. It was my decision to stay or leave. Sure, he said. And you were going to stand against that wall all night. She stared at him. You don't know that. I watched you for 12 minutes before I talked to you, he said. You looked at your watch twice. You looked at the door 3 times. You were calculating whether the polite amount of time had passed. A beat of silence. The accuracy of this was somewhat humiliating. You watched me for 12 minutes, she said flatly. You were interesting, he said, as if this were a perfectly normal explanation. You were the only person in the room who looked like they'd rather be somewhere better. And your solution was to carry me out. You were stalling, he said simply. So I moved things along. She studied him. He was not apologizing, not performing remorse, not trying to win her over with charm or deflection. He was just sitting there, forearms on the table, looking at her like she was a landscape he was genuinely happy to spend time examining. You do this often? She asked. Kidnap women from social events? First time, he said. You're a special case. I'm not a case. He smiled. Not a big smile. Just the corner of one, like it was being rationed. No, you're not. The water arrived. She picked hers up and didn't drink it. Why am I here, Archie? Because I like you, he said. She blinked. You don't know me. I know enough to want to. That's not, she stopped. People don't just say that. People don't say a lot of things that are true, he said. She leaned back, folding her arms. This was the point at which she would normally move toward the exit. She felt the impulse clearly, the familiar tightening that preceded retreat, the narrative already composing itself in her head. Too forward, too certain, not enough time to properly evaluate. She began to rise. Jasmine. She stopped. He hadn't raised his voice. You're doing exactly what you always do, he said. She turned back slowly. You don't know what I always do. You're ending this before it starts, he said. Because that's safer. Safer than sitting here and finding out if it's real. Her jaw tightened. That's an enormous assumption from someone who watched me across a party for 12 minutes. Then correct me, he said. Sit down. Correct me. She stood there for a moment, bag in hand, looking at him. He met her gaze without moving, without urgency, without the pleading that usually accompanied this moment in her experience. He just waited, steady as a wall. Why isn't he backing down? She sat back down. She didn't speak immediately. Neither did he. The restaurant moved around them in soft waves of candlelight and conversation, and the silence between them was not uncomfortable. That was the strangest part. You're very sure of yourself? She said finally. About most things, he said. About you. I'm working with limited information. That's why I'm still here. She looked at him for a long moment. Something she couldn't immediately name shifted in her chest. Don't do that again, she said. Which part? Carrying me out of somewhere. I'm not luggage. Understood, he said, and had the restraint not to smile. She picked up the menu. She didn't look at him, but she stayed. And that, more than everything else, was the first real thing. Chapter 8. He texted 3 days later. Not that night, not the next morning, 3 days. Which was its own kind of statement. By the time her phone showed his name, she had spent approximately 40 minutes total convincing herself she didn't care if he texted. The message read, Dinner. Thursday. 7 p.m. No question mark. She stared at it. Then she typed. That's not how asking someone works. He replied in under a minute. I know. Is Thursday good? She waited 15 minutes, then typed, yes, and was briefly angry at herself for the yes. Thursday happened. Then a coffee on Saturday. Then a long walk along the Battery in Charleston that she hadn't planned for and found herself not wanting to end. They argued twice. Once about whether ambition was the same as drive. Once because she redirected their dinner reservation without telling him, and he said, calmly, don't do that again. And she waited for the apology she usually issued to keep the peace and realized she didn't know him one, and also that he was right. She did not apologize. She said, you should have had an opinion about where we were eating. He said, I did. You didn't ask. A long pause. Point taken, she said, which cost her more than he probably realized. He didn't celebrate it. He just nodded and moved on. The arguments were different with him. With other men, she had argued to win, and winning meant the other person conceded. With Archie, she argued, and he didn't concede. He didn't bend in the places she expected, and yet the argument eventually ended not because someone surrendered, but because they moved through it to the other side. She wasn't sure she had ever done that before. One afternoon they sat on a bench near the harbor, watching a ferry cross the water. A couple walked past them arguing in hushed, tired voices. They're not going to last, Jasmine said. Archie glanced at them. Why not? They look exhausted by each other. Not tired, exhausted. That's the difference. He was quiet for a moment. Or they're going through something difficult, and that's what it looks like. Jasmine shook her head. People leave, she said, and then immediately wished she hadn't, because the words had come out unmediated, just raw fact the way her body understood it. She looked at the water. Only when they're pushed far enough, Archie said. She felt that land. I don't push people. You do, he said. But I think you're testing whether they'll stay, not actually trying to drive them out. She turned to look at him. He was already looking at the water, not at her, like he knew she needed the room to take that in without an audience. "That's the same thing," she said quietly. "Is it?" She didn't answer. A moment passed. Then she said, even more quietly, "I don't trust that people stay." Archie nodded. Not quickly, not with false reassurance. Just a slow, considered nod. "I know. You've known me 7 weeks," she said. "You can't know that." "You've shown me," he said. "Every time you test something or deflect or pick up your bag to leave when the conversation gets real. I'm not criticizing it. I'm just telling you I see it." She was quiet for a long time. "And you're still here," she said finally, half to herself. "Still here," he confirmed. No grand declaration. Just the fact of it. Jasmine looked at the water. The ferry was almost across now. She didn't say anything else. She didn't need to. She just let the silence sit between them. And for the first time in as long as she could remember, she didn't try to fill or end or escape it. She just sat in it, beside him, while the sun moved and the water caught the light. And that ordinary, quiet, undramatic thing, was the most frightening and the most real she had felt in years. Chapter 9. 6 months in, Jasmine sat across from Archie at a cafe overlooking Sullivan's Island, watching the Atlantic work itself into slow, gray rolls against the shore. Her coffee was cold. She hadn't touched it. "You're not listening," he said. "I am listening." "You're managing," he said. "There's a difference. Listening means you let it in. Managing means you're processing it already before it's finished." She looked at him. This was infuriating. Partially because she was, in fact, already 2 sentences ahead of whatever he was saying, cataloging it for weaknesses or implications. Partially because the fact that he could see this without anger or resentment, just clear, patient observation, made it impossible to dismiss. "This is harder than arguing," she said. "Because it matters," he said. She let that land. She picked up her cold coffee and drank it anyway. 2 weeks after the cafe, she was trying to assemble a bookshelf from a flat pack she had been given as a housewarming gift 2 years earlier and had never opened because she did not like things that required assembling. Archie found her on the floor surrounded by planks and hardware in her Georgetown apartment. "What's the plan?" he asked, crouching down beside her. "I'm problem solving." "You're arguing with a diagram." She held up the instruction sheet, which she had folded and unfolded so many times it was coming apart at the creases. "This is deliberately unclear." "Give it here," he said. She held on to it for a second. Then she gave it to him, which was, for her, the equivalent of a significant concession. He assembled the shelf in 40 minutes. She handed him pieces when he asked and made 2 observations he integrated without comment, and she realized midway through that she was not tense. She was just there, on the floor, in old jeans and a worn university sweatshirt, not in charge, not performing, just present. That night, walking home after dinner on M Street, he took off his jacket without preamble and put it over her shoulders. She stopped walking. "I don't need," she started. "You were cold," he said, already walking again. "It's not a metaphor. Just a jacket." She stood there for a second. Then she caught up to him. The jacket was warm and slightly too large, and smelled like him in a way that made her aware of its presence the entire walk home. She didn't take it off. She told herself it was because it was practical. She was not entirely convincing. 3 weeks after the jacket incident, that was how she filed it, the jacket incident, they had the first argument that didn't resolve itself inside an hour. It was about the sauce on the pasta, which was not what it was about. It was about the fact that she had corrected him in front of his friend at dinner, and he had said quietly afterward, "Don't do that to me." "I was right," she said. "You were," he said. "And you could have told me after." She sat with that for a very long time. She sat with it overnight. And the next morning she sent him a message that took her 6 drafts and read, "You were right." "I'm sorry." He replied, "Thank you. Are you free Saturday?" Not a word about how long it took or how much it probably cost her. Just, "Are you free Saturday?" Like they were already on the other side of it. She sat with that, too. Walking home alone that evening, she passed a couple arguing playfully outside a restaurant. The woman laughing despite herself, the man catching her hand, the two of them folding back into each other without deciding to. Jasmine watched and thought, I want that. She thought it plainly, without defense, without dismissing it. I want that. It was the first time in her life she had let herself want something she couldn't immediately control. She kept walking, but slower than before. Chapter 10. 8 months into whatever this was, Jasmine sat on the edge of her bed at 11:30 on a Tuesday night, staring at the wall. She had just come home from dinner with Archie, the kind of dinner that had been entirely ordinary and had inexplicably wrecked her. They had talked for 3 hours. He had made her laugh 4 times, which she had counted without meaning to. When he walked her to her building, he had kissed her forehead instead of her mouth, which was somehow both less and more than she knew what to do with. She sat on the bed and looked at the wall and tried to name what was in her chest. It wasn't fear. She knew fear. She had lived inside fear for years while calling it wisdom. This was bigger. This was the thing underneath fear, the thing fear had been covering. It was wanting. Pure, inconvenient, unstoppable wanting. She wanted him to stay. Not for a dinner or a walk or a date. She wanted him to stay in the way that meant something structural, something load-bearing. This terrified her more precisely than anything she had encountered in 28 years of carefully managed living. She called Simone at midnight. Simone answered on the second ring, which meant she had been awake, which meant she had been expecting this call. Say it, Simone said. I think I'm. Jasmine stopped. Say it out loud. Simone. Jasmine. Say it. A long pause. Then, I think I'm in love with him. The sentence sat in the air of her apartment like something that had never been there before. New furniture. Unexpected weight. Oh, thank God, Simone said. That's not helpful. It is, though. Simone's voice was warm and certain. Jazz. It is. You're in love with someone you can't control, and you haven't left. That's the whole point. That's all of it right there. Jasmine pressed her free hand against her sternum. I feel terrible. I know. That's what it feels like when it's real. That seems like a design flaw. Simone laughed softly. Does he know? No. Are you going to tell him? Absolutely not. Jasmine, I need to think about this. You've been thinking about everything your whole life, Simone said. How's that been working? Jasmine looked at the wall. Don't say things that are accurate at midnight. Go to sleep. And the next time you see him, just be honest. Not all of it at once. Just be honest. Jasmine said goodnight and sat in the dark for another hour. She thought about all the men she had evaluated and dismissed and walked away from first. All the walls she had built with such care and such conviction that they had started to feel like personality traits rather than fortifications. She thought about the girl on the playground in Richmond who had learned that standing her ground was the only thing that kept the sand off her. She thought about how long she had been standing, and how tired her legs had gotten, and how no one had told her that sometimes standing down was not defeat. Sometimes standing down was just arriving. She turned off the light. She lay in the dark, and she let herself be afraid and wanting at the same time. Because maybe that was what honesty actually felt like when you had avoided it long enough. She was in love. She wasn't going to run. That was enough for tonight. Chapter 11. 2 years after the baby shower in Charleston, almost to the week, Jasmine was sitting on the balcony of her Georgetown apartment watching the sky turn colors over the Potomac when Archie came outside with 2 glasses of wine. This was not unusual. Sunday evenings had become theirs in the specific way that recurring things become rituals, without announcement, without negotiation, just quietly and repeatedly until they were simply part of the architecture. You're thinking, he said, settling into the chair beside her. I'm always thinking. You're thinking something specific. She took the wine. I was thinking about how long it took me to stop treating every person who got close to me as a liability. He looked at her. Past tense. Mostly. He smiled. Progress. They sat for a while. The sky moved from orange to deep rose to the first edge of blue. Jasmine had learned, over 2 years, to sit inside a silence without filling it. It had been the hardest thing and the most returning. Archie had never needed her to perform. He had never needed the armor. He had just waited, with the kind of patience that did not feel passive because it was never uncertain. He shifted in his chair, and something in the shift registered before she could identify it. She turned. He had a small box in his hand. Dark blue. Clean lines. Her heart moved sideways. "Jasmine," he said, and his voice was the same as it always was, not performing, not nervous, just him. "I'm not going to tell you that I fixed you or figured you out, because neither of those things are true and you'd know it if I tried. What I know is that you are the most interesting, most complicated, most worth it person I have sat across a dinner table from. And I want to sit across from you for the rest of my life." She looked at the box, then at him. Her throat closed. "I've spent 2 years watching you decide to stay," he said. "Every time it was hard. Every time you could have left. And you stayed. I want to make it permanent." Her hands weren't entirely steady when she reached for the box. Inside was a ring, a single stone, clean and unfussy. Exactly what she would have chosen for herself if she had ever let herself think about it, which she had never let herself do. She thought about the girl in the principal's office, the teenager walking out of the diner, the woman standing at the edges of every room she had ever entered. She thought about how all of those versions of herself had wanted this, something real, something standing still, something that chose her back, and had been so certain it would cost too much to reach for. "I have to tell you something," she said, her voice not quite even. "Okay," he said. "I've spent my entire life making sure no one could leave me first." She looked at him. "And you are the first person who made me want to stop." A pause. His expression was steady, open, waiting. "Yes," she said. "Archie." "Yes." He slid the ring onto her finger and didn't say anything for a moment. Neither did she. The city was below them, going about its business, entirely unaware. She looked at her hand, then at him. "Don't ever carry me out of a party again," she said. He laughed, a full, warm, genuine laugh that she felt in her chest. "I make no promises." She leaned her shoulder into his. Outside, the sky had gone fully dark, and the city below them was all light and motion. And inside this one balcony, the two of them were still. Chosen. Arrived. Chapter 12. They married on a Saturday in October at a stone chapel outside of Annapolis, Maryland. Old ivy on the exterior, high narrow windows filled with autumn light, the kind of place that felt like it had been standing long enough to take this seriously. Jasmine stood in the vestibule in her gown, a clean ivory column dress, structured at the shoulders, nothing fussy, exactly her, and looked at her own hands. No armor, no plan. No exit strategy. Simone stood beside her, 8 months pregnant and magnificently unbothered by it, straightening Jasmine's shoulder with 2 fingers. "You look terrified," she said. "I am slightly terrified," Jasmine said. "Good," Simone said. "That means you're taking it seriously." That's either very reassuring or the opposite. Simone looked at her with the warmth of 16 years and said, "Jazz, you are ready. You have been ready since the night you called me at midnight. You were just doing the last bit of convincing." Jasmine exhaled. "I called you every other week for 8 months. Convincing took a while," Simone agreed. "But here you are." Here she was. The doors opened. The light that fell in was gold and immediate and warm, and the small chapel was full of the people they had collected. Archie's family from Edinburgh, her family from Richmond, colleagues and old friends who had watched this from varying distances and were here now because they had known before the participants did that this was going to happen. Jasmine walked down the aisle alone. She had insisted on that, not because she didn't want to be accompanied, but because she needed to make this choice the same way she made every real choice, with full awareness, without being managed into it. Archie stood at the end of the aisle in a dark charcoal suit with a simple white buttonhole. He watched her walk toward him with an expression that was quiet and complete, like a man who had been waiting at exactly the right place and had always known she would arrive. She reached him. His hand came up, and she took it. "You came," he said very quietly, "for her alone." "I always was," she replied. The vows they had written themselves were plain and exact. This was not a woman who trafficked in ornate promises. She said, "I choose you every day, not because it is easy, because you have shown me that choosing something you cannot control is not weakness. It is the whole point." She heard Simone cry softly from the front row. She held it together by a small margin. Archie said, "I have waited for you. I would wait again. You are worth every second of the particular difficulty of loving you." He said this last part with a smile, and there was laughter in the chapel, and Jasmine laughed too, and the laughter did what laughter does in the middle of sacred things. It made it human, and therefore real. They kissed. The room erupted. At the reception at a converted waterfront granary in Annapolis, she danced. Actually danced, not the too polite obligatory dances she had planned, but for 2 hours, until her feet protested, and she gave a toast that was honest and funny and did not once try to manage the room. Near the end of the evening, she sat in a chair at the edge of the dance floor with her shoes off and Archie beside her, and she thought about every room she had stood at the edges of, every party she had watched from the wall, every door she had stood just outside of. She looked at her hand, the ring on it. She looked at him. "I'm in," she said. He took her hand. "You've been in since the baby shower," he said. "I could tell." She shook her head, almost laughing. "You could not. You didn't get out of the car," he said. She looked at him, at this man who had watched her from across a room for 12 minutes, picked her up and carried her out of a party, and then sat across from her in a restaurant waiting with complete patience for her to decide to stay. "No," she admitted. "I didn't." "That told me everything," he said. Around them, the reception continued, music and movement and the warmth of people who loved them. Jasmine sat in the middle of it with her shoes off and her hand in his and felt, for the first time, and then again, and then in every moment after, exactly like herself. Not defended, not managed, not behind anything. Just herself arrived. Chapter 13. 3 years after the wedding, Jasmine stood at the kitchen island on a Sunday morning in their row house in the Capitol Hill neighborhood of Washington, D.C., chopping fruit in unhurried slices while their daughter, Cora, 3.5 years old, and in possession of approximately 40% more energy than any room could comfortably contain, stood on her step stool beside her narrating the proceedings. "That one's too big," Cora said, pointing at a piece of mango. "Is it?" "Yeah, way too big. Thank you for your input." "You're welcome." A pause. "What's input?" Jasmine looked at her, this small, specific, ridiculous person, and felt the same thing she felt every morning, this eruption of warmth so uncomplicated that it still surprised her, 3 years in. "Input means your opinion," she said. "I have lots of opinions." "I know. You get that from me. And Dad. Dad has opinions too. They're just quieter." Archie appeared in the kitchen doorway in an old gray t-shirt and weekend trousers, coffee in hand, watching the two of them with the expression she had come to know as his most honest one, the one he wore when he thought no one was paying attention to him yet. "The fruit commentary has started early today," he said. "She's concerned about portion size," Jasmine said. "I see." He came in and lifted Cora off the step stool, depositing her on his hip. "What are your findings?" "The mango is too big," Cora said seriously. "Noted," he said. Later, while Cora colored at the dining table and Archie read the paper, Simone arrived. As she arrived every Sunday she was in the city, at 10 a.m., carrying a paper bag of pastries and the specific energy of a woman who had somewhere to be and was choosing this instead. She set the bag down, poured herself a coffee, and sat across from Jasmine with the look of someone ready to have an honest conversation. "Say it," Jasmine said. "I'm just looking at you," Simone said. "You have a face." "I have a happy face," Simone said. I'm allowed a happy face. You look different. I'm wearing the same. Not your clothes. You. Simone tilted her head. You're relaxed. Actually relaxed. Not performing relaxed. I can tell the difference. Jasmine was quiet for a moment. She looked at Cora across the room, who was now singing quietly to herself while she colored, a song she had invented that had no discernible structure or intention beyond existing. I stopped waiting for the other shoe, Jasmine said. Simone looked at her steadily. When? Gradually. And then all at once. Jasmine turned her coffee cup slowly. I think the moment I stopped holding everything at arm's length, I realized how much I had been holding, how much energy it took, and what happened when I just put some of it down. Simone nodded. And nothing fell apart, Jasmine said. That's the thing. I always thought if I stopped controlling it, something would break. And instead, she looked at the room, at the cup in her hands, at the small sound of her daughter singing, at her husband turning a page in the other room. I just got to be here. Simone's eyes filled briefly. She blinked it back with the decisiveness of a woman who had cried in front of Jasmine enough times to know the ratio. I'm proud of you, she said. You told me I was scared at 15, Jasmine said. You've been waiting 20 years to say that. 13 years, Simone said. And yes. Jasmine laughed. Cora abandoned her coloring and climbed into Jasmine's lap without asking, as if this were simply the correct place for her to be. Jasmine put her arms around her and held on. Archie came to the kitchen for a second coffee and paused beside them, resting his hand briefly on Jasmine's shoulder. A simple, unannounced thing, the kind of touch that was not a gesture but a habit, which was what love became when it had time to settle into a life. She reached up and put her hand over his for a moment. The morning continued. The light shifted across the kitchen floor. Cora asked 17 questions that had no reasonable answers. Simone ate 3 pastries and pretended it was 1. Archie made scrambled eggs and made Cora try to count the pieces, which kept her occupied for 6 minutes. Jasmine sat in the middle of all of it and thought, this is the thing I was protecting myself from. This ordinary, loud, imperfect, chosen thing. She thought about the girl in Richmond who learned that standing her ground was how you survived. She thought about that girl, and she was grateful for her. That girl had kept her alive and upright through everything that needed surviving. And then she had arrived here. To a Sunday morning with eggs on the stove and a daughter who thought all mangoes were the wrong size, and a man who had never once needed her armor because he had simply refused to treat her like she needed one. She looked at Cora, who was now explaining to Simone, at length, her theory about the color yellow. She wanted this child to know what it had taken Jasmine almost 30 years to understand. That strength was not the same as distance. That love was not a battlefield or a trap or a test. That you could be fearless and also soft. Certain and also open. Yourself and also held. Archie came back and sat down beside her. You okay? He asked. She looked at him. The gray t-shirt, the morning coffee, the familiar steadiness of him. Better than okay, she said. He nodded. That was enough. Outside, Washington moved through its Sunday at its own pace. And inside this one kitchen, Jasmine Pickering, who had once stood at the edges of every room, who had tested and defended and walked out first for the better part of a decade, sat in the middle of her life with her hands open and her feet still. Not fighting, not managing, not protecting anything. Just home. Hello, lovers and billionaires. We have come to the end of today's story. If you enjoyed it, take a few seconds to like the video and drop a comment, and if you're not a part of the family yet, please subscribe and turn on notifications. This is our own little corner of the internet, so be sure to visit every day because I upload exciting, emotional, and unforgettable stories every single day, and you don't want to miss what's coming next.